5.2 isn't even out yet, but the 5.2 Spiral Abyss usage rates are. We're going to go over what is very surprising and what is not, and we're going to talk about how, although I do think the usage rates are very valuable to look at and keep an eye on, how something in here is very much not indicative of the tier list format that it uses. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. Starting at the top, Furina at 85.5% makes perfect sense. For those who don't know, this is 85% of people who have Furina used Furina, so not including those people who don't have Furina, but I'm sure a lot of people do. Over 100,000 people are counted for this chart, and it is self-reported. It doesn't come from like Genshin data mining itself. It is user submitted with all the baggage that comes with that. Shallonen next at 83.5%. Once again, makes perfect sense to me. Very, very broken character, new character, easy to build, easy to play. Neuvillette, the strongest and easiest DPS to use in the game. Strongest overall, maybe not the highest peaks, but pretty darn close, especially with Shallonen, and by far the most quality of life. If you remember my last usage statistic, almost half of people who use Neuvillette do have his C1 here, so that's pretty interesting. Lots of people going for that constellation. Zhongli in fourth, which absolutely amazing. Never ceases to amaze me how high Zhongli always is, no matter how much most serious content creators talk about how he's a DPS loss, including myself, of course. We can't ever forget how easy to use he is. And because the DPS check for the Abyss isn't crazy high, especially right now, you can much more easily get away with a Zhongli on your C0 Neuvillette team, on your Arlecchino team, on your Mualani team, on your Hu Tao team, on your Navia Tulpa. It hits very hard. It can like pretty much one-shot you, and it can vape you like if you're using Bennett or something. So having a Zhongli on your side, I'm guessing that the second half is where people are more concerned with not dying, and that's why Zhongli is being very used. He's very good at helping you not die. Great. Good job, Zhongli. Kazuha, still very high. If we look at my previous Spiral Abyss video, Kazuha was 70%, Zhongli was 82. The one before that, Zhongli 72, and Kazuha 74. So they are trending down a little bit, but they're still both extremely high. One character not trending down is Yelan. Yelan's so broken, especially in a Shallonen core with Furina. Crazy. Shallonen, Furina, Yelan, and basically anyone else is so incredibly good. Bennett, still the most broken character for attack buffers, over almost 3/5. I don't know what the math is. A lot of people using Bennett, even though he's a 4-star, by far the highest usage rate of any 4-star on this list. Not quite double Xingqiu, almost double Kuki, and over tripling Fischl, or almost quadrupling. So yeah, and not quite doubling Xiangling. So very impressive usage statistics from good old Benny Boy. Nahida still very used, despite my proclamation that she is falling off. She's still very strong, regardless of her not being as strong as she once was. Just don't forget, she was at one point super Omega used. But now, of course, there's other great options. Arlecchino, very easy to play, very high DPS. Baizhu, I think, down from 37 to 32, and he was at 53. So he's taking a bit of a dive, trending down. I still expect him to go lower, and Yaimiko did exceptionally well, sometimes outperforming Fischl, sometimes being on par. Very close regardless. I'm not saying that Yai is a great pull or anything, but I have always assumed that she's like a downgrade to Fischl in a lot of these teams, and it turns out she's pretty much a side grade, which is pretty good if you're a Yai fan. Now, obviously, she's using a lot of field time, blah, but I feel like a lot of people underrate her and just say she's trash because she's a side grade to Fischl. Sometimes she can outperform Fischl, even when you wouldn't necessarily expect it. So especially when you're talking multi-wave, or if you're talking some AoE with that burst nuke she has. She's only bursting every other rotation, but sometimes that's all you need. Chiori, super underrated character, but to be fair, she does really want her C1. She's still pretty solid without it, and it really pisses me off how annoying she is, and I'm part of the problem. I went and got her C1 on her rerun so that I could test it, because I feel like, yeah, this is a character that benefits hugely from her C1. Xingqiu, very high. Raiden, always DPS and support potential. Xiangling, still our only off-field power option. I am hugely interested to see what happens to Xiangling usage rates when we either get Pyro Archon or Pyro Traveler or whoever replaces Xiangling for Pyro off-field application, I feel like people are going to drop her so fast, it's crazy. She is hard to use in a lot of teams. Probably Raiden National is one of her most used teams. That's generally Raiden's most used teams on these lists. Alhaitham, always very strong. Kuki, Kinich, really, really high placement. Emily, really high. Wriothesley, really, really high. Hu Tao, Navia, Clorand, finally seeing some solid usage. Go Clorand. Linny, really high. This tells me that there's a lot of PC players on here. Sigewinne, this is a great example of representing characters that, like, not very many people pulled for Sigewinne, but those that do play them. Shen Yun, Tighnari, Fischl, Zhao. And this is the big one that I wanted to talk about that really doesn't represent their strength, is Mualani. Now, Mualani is reset impact, the character. So when I'm judging her, I don't pretend that she's easy to play and that, oh, everyone should totally get her and that she's so broken and she's the best DPS in the game. But what I would like to say is that she does an absolute crap ton of damage if you build her properly. So I mess up the clear here a little bit. I could have done this a good bit faster. I probably could have even possibly come close to one rotating the chamber if I baited them towards the edge. But if you look here, just looking at the first chamber, the amount of damage she's doing at Constellation 0 with Constellation 0 on all her support. It's actually Mona is C1 here, but 600,000 damage nukes consistently. She's doing crazy damage, and she's clearing among the fastest of any character that I have in the Abyss. And this Abyss isn't particularly good for her with all the running around enemies, but if you know how to use her, she's crazy strong. And that's basically the same sort of thing as Linny, except her highs are even higher. So I really feel like Mualani is extremely underrated. Now, granted, I have a really good build for her, and I do have her weapon, and she has reset impact, so I get it. I knock her down because of that. I don't consider her like the best DPS in the game just because she has the highest potential. But at only 15%, you would assume she's kind of mid. But in reality, she's really, really strong sometimes and just reset impact other times. And it's just one of these situations where it depends on what you value, consistency or peak damage. But I think peak damage is worth, considering, worth looking at. So yeah, Child, Wanderer, Kokomi. I can't talk about every single character because it's just gonna last forever. Shenhe, I would love to Sino, Charlotte, Nilou, Thoma, Dea, Layla. Number one most used team, the new Neuvillette team, makes perfect sense. It's extremely strong. Tighnari, very, very used. Tighnari Yai, very, very highly used on the second half. I better give this another try. Haven't played Tighnari in a good long while. Arlecchino Vape with Zhongli. I really like this team. Very, very simple, very easy to play. I tend to prefer Xiaolonen these days instead of Zhongli, but hey, you're standing in Bennett's Circle facing the Tulpa. I totally get why you'd want Zhongli, because you're easily defeating Tulpa anyway, so you might as well. Zhao. And another thing I would like to talk about is this list really favors teams that don't have a lot of variance to them. So teams that have different options for them are going to be pushed much lower down. So you can't see it, but Raiden's in here at 13th, Raiden National. There's two kinds of Raiden Nationals. Raiden National with Yelan, Raiden National with Xingqiu, and also technically Raiden National with Furina. And so since they sort of split the vote, so to speak, whereas, there's only one Tighnari team that's really heavily played. One thing to consider is that characters like Hu Tao is using double Hydro, and you'd think that would be spell death for the Tulpa, but you're getting vapes on every hit anyways against the Tulpa, so it doesn't really matter, and you still get Yelan's buff, and Xingqiu's damage reduction stacks with Zhongli's shield, so it still works. By the way, my buddy Jonathan on Discord, shout out to Jonathan, he gave me a little extra info here from the app that I was having a hard time getting working. We can see the ownership rate of some of these characters. Only 67% of people have Xiaolonen. I'm surprised. I would have thought more. 93 have Kazuha. I guess a lot of people are not going to be convinced of Xiaolonen until the rerun. Fair enough. 67% of people have Neuvillette, just barely beating out the percentage of people that have Xiaolonen. Actually crazy for a DPS to have that high of an ownership rate. 75 for Yelan. 76.7 for Raiden is a crazy number, especially considering the fact that her usage rate is still at a really solid 30%. 40% for Arlecchino, still very high for a DPS. We can see the top changes with Yelan being used 14% more, Nahida being used more, Yamiko, Linny. I mean, this Abyss charge attacks are buffed, so I guess sort of makes sense. Kuki used a bit more. Hu Tao, Clorand with a sizable bump considering her percentage before. Alhaitham Yoimiya with a pretty solid bump. And then the characters taking a dip. Navia with a huge dip. All the Geos taking a dip because it's not Geo favored like the last one was. Bennett going down a bit. Baiju, Farina, and then these ones barely changed. This is pretty funny. Aloy Mains made a post saying Aloy's usage rate has doubled. She's now at 0.2%. I think the Aloy mains are rising up and they're trying to overtake the usage rate charts. So impressive stuff from Aloy. She now has more usage than beloved Lisa, which is very shocking. I'm surprised to see Candace still this low now that she's usable in Arlecchino, Arlecchino, Nilou, and Mulaney teams. But hey, Ningguang also got a big buff, but still seeing no usage. Fair enough, other characters got buffed more. Same with Noelle. I would expect more usage from Noelle. What you gonna do? Mona also is a lot better, but still with pitiful usage rate. The worst usage except for, well, actually Diluc and Chi-Chi are worse, but still. And then Venti being that's crazy. The first Archon, the least used character, the least used limited 5-star in all of Genshin Impact. It makes sense. Venti has been more and more useless. But that's crazy. Klee being this low is I don't know if it's surprising. It's definitely paints her in a very underrated light because Klee is actually very strong. She's really not that far off from especially the DPSs in B tier. But this is another one that really shows that just being unpopular and being old and being in a saturated niche really pushes down the usage for some characters. Eula is down here, but Eula, I really believe that Eula will go to the moon one day when we get off-field support, physical supports, and physical off-field DPS. I'm sure it'll happen eventually. It has to. And then I've got a new Albedo. He's going to be featured in a video coming up soon, so we'll have some stuff to say about him. So this was very interesting. I always like to look at these just because it reminds me of how people are using certain characters, and it does inform my tier list. I don't like take this as gospel, but what people are actually using patch after patch, especially looking at trends, is very interesting to see how people are finding characters, you know, strong or weak or enjoyable, and also where, you know, clear favoritism and bias comes into the picture. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know who you're going for. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps out the channel. But if you don't want to, that's totally okay. Just watching the video has been more than enough. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye for now.